Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Lenny and I want to make a video here about the case against the Squad 6.0 update, also known as the ICO Infantry Combat Overhaul. Over the course of the past 2 weeks and maybe slightly prior, there's been a lot of discussion about this topic on Reddit, forums, Discords, yada yada. And I think it quickly devolves into a name calling or good versus evil topic, with either side, quickly demonizing the other. And I don't think that we've really had a good chance for some of the players that have been around for a long time to express some of our gripes with this video. That being said, I'm not criticizing people that are supporters of the ICO here. I just want to make sure and that I get my thoughts down in a concise place about what my problems with the ICO are. I suspect a lot of the squad comp community is going to mirror these feelings, and just want to put them in front of you so that you can make a decision and come to your own conclusions. I'd also love to see a video that refutes some of my points or explains why they don't matter, or why that despite them, the infantry combat overhaul is still a useful thing to have, or is still good for squad and the health of the game. Just a little bit about me before I get into my thoughts on the ICO, so that you know who I am. I've been playing FPS games at a fairly high level for over 20 years now. Started off playing games like CS 1.6, moved on to pretty much every FPS under the sun, obscure things that you've probably never heard of, like Soldier Front, Arctic Combat, Combat Arms, Blackshot. And then, more recently moved on to Battlefield, PUBG, Apex, newer iterations of Counter-Strike. And now in Squad, I have approximately 2,000 hours. And I've played a lot of pubs. The vast majority of that is in pubs. I also have, hundreds of hours playing in a competitive environment in Squad. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into my thoughts on the ICO. My first problem with the ICO is something that I think people who even support the changes is something that they won't disagree with has occurred. It's that we have increased the amount of randomness involved with the game, or RNG, involved with shooting and gameplay in general. Going back in very, very basic game development theory, RNG elements are typically something that is frowned upon in gaming, or something that you need to find a very, very, very delicate balance for. No level of RNG allows for things that can become very stagnant and boring, and too much RNG decreases skill elements of the game, meaning that the long-term enjoyability of it decreases very drastically. A quick example of this for something that isn't, video gaming, would be gambling. Now, there are skill games such as blackjack and poker. Now, while those involve a decent amount of RNG, there is also a significant skill element. And then on the flip side of them, there are slots games, which are purely RNG based. And the amount of time that most of us who enjoy improving at things will find is that it's very, very easy to get bored with a game like slots, whereas a game like poker will maintain our interest for a significantly longer period of time. So a lot of the arguments that I'm going to make coming up in the future all stem from this basic game theory or game design problem or question that too much RNG is harmful to a game, harmful to the long-term replayability of a game, and in general, not as fun as something that is more skill-based. Suppression is one of the recent changes that has increased the amount of randomness or RNG involved with Squad. Now, this change, I believe, is among the least harmful of things that were implemented, and it's something that I'm not entirely condemning. That being said, I believe the current level of suppression still significantly minimizes the importance of having good aim. I'm personally opposed to that idea, but I can understand arguments that are for it. I believe that, number one, suppression in the prior state actually had a impact on gunfights, contrary to common opinion. Now, I'm not sure how familiar everybody here is with the mechanics of the prior suppression system, but with the prior system, suppression actually did induce a certain amount of inaccuracy when you're firing. What I mean by that is when you are looking down your sight and you are suppressed in the prior versions of the game, so update 5.0, your bullets did not go exactly where your crosshair was aiming. In addition to that, you had increased sway. Now, that was something that was fairly minimal. I could see that being something that could even be toned up slightly while you were at full stamina, so that you were somewhat impacted by that, but to a level where you were still able to compensate. Maybe it becomes more difficult to aim, but suppression in the prior state, your bullets did not go exactly where your reticle was. It actually increased the spread, and how this worked in game was like supposedly your sight picture alignment was not exact. I don't know if that's exactly a realistic implementation, but it was something that was at a level that still allowed skilled players to shine, and it was something where you could overcome the detriment that was being put against you. This system, no doubt, was inconsistent with the application, was applied in ridiculous ways. I think the prior system could have simply had improvements, or even the changes that I made before, and that we could have built off the system that was already in place without having to completely overhaul it. The current system creates a blurry mess of a game that virtually makes you worthless as far as returning fire. I understand what the developers are going for, and that if you are being suppressed, you should not even try to shoot back. The problem is, in a game like Squad, there are going to be plenty of times where you can just be constantly suppressed. And if you are always suppressed, you are never able to move. There are going to be times when you can't move out of other directions, and that will further slow down the game. The most common argument I've seen by ICO supporters against people who dislike the changes is that the game was too arcadey in update 5.0 or prior to the ICO. I'll see things posted like go back to COD, or people will say prior iterations allowed for run and gun gameplay, similar to COD, and that it was something that just doesn't belong in Squad. I personally believe these arguments are entirely misplaced. I don't want to say that they're in bad faith, but I don't think that people are really thinking about what they're posting prior to making a statement like this. I've created a scale here that I believe shows the breakdown of arcade versus milsim shooters. This was done flippantly. I did it in about a minute and a half in Paint, but it shows my general feelings about where the games fall along the spectrum. I think most of us can agree that there is some sort of spectrum, and that you can call one game more milsim than the others, and that some are more arcadey than others. Some of you may disagree with the placement of some of these games. That is fine. That's totally fine. I'm simply looking to convey my thoughts so that all of you can gain insight into the feelings of players who believe they've been slighted by this update. Undoubtedly, most of us will agree that a game like Quake is more arcadey than a game like COD, which is more arcadey than a game like Battlefield, which is more arcadey than a game like Squad. My challenge to you is to really think about all of these games if you've played them, and think about, it was Squad in the 5.0 update really that close to Call of Duty? Think about things like general gunplay mechanics, how the guns feel when you shoot them. Think about things like the time between engagements, how you spawn in, scope of the maps, size of maps, scope of, or I should say the importance of positioning, your general play style, movement speed, scale of battles, distance of engagements. Just think about all those things and think to yourself, what games really are more milsimmy than Squad, or were more milsimmy than Squad in 5.0. No doubt, a lot of us will say Arma, and I'm sure some of us will mention some obscure games. But regardless of those feelings, I think the vast majority of us would agree that a game like Squad is certainly closer to the gameplay of Arma as far as Milsim goes than a game like Quake. And I believe, the majority of us will also believe that, a game like Squad is probably closer to a game like Arma as far as Milsim goes than a game like Battlefield is to something like Quake. So just think about this scale and think about, do we really think Squad was in danger of becoming a arcade-like game? Or do we believe that things like teamwork, strategy, positioning, play style are things that were, mirrored real world tactics on some level that is significantly more realistic than a game like Call of Duty? I'll leave you with that. One of the biggest problems I see with the update is how hard it buffed stagnant play. Sure, this is realistic. Bunkering down behind hard cover is an advantage against small arms fire. But the question here is it good gameplay? Are we really willing to sacrifice the enjoyment of having dynamic games in a video game like Squad that is, dynamic games that are fueled by the balance between attacking and defending, where you have to carefully weigh, the benefits of securing a point and getting those extra 60 tickets by capturing it? Does it feel rewarding in the current iteration of Squad 6.0 to attack points? Or do you feel like it is significantly easier to defend points and that the strategy for winning games is turtling? In an effort to nerf run-and-gun type players, or so-called run-and-gun type players, the ICO implemented an additional system that increases the amount of weapon sway you experience after moving. This is additive to the existing stamina system that already existed in the game and caused you to have weapon sway when you were at low health, after you were sprinting for long distances, or when you were being suppressed. There's no mechanic to counter it. If you move, you simply can't aim as well. Ask yourself, is it easier to push an angle, run into a room in Squad, and then try to shoot somebody who is behind hard cover? Or is it easier to be that person who's already in hard cover, who is already hard scoped on a door that somebody is going to try to run through? I think the answer is fairly simple, and the answer is it is significantly easier to play defensively and simply hard scope a tight angle. Games have almost always been harder to attack in than to defend. Competitive arcade shooters have map design or mechanics where the entire purpose of their existence is to counteract the advantage defensive players have. Think about things like flashbangs in a game like Counter-Strike, or think about things like 50-50 angles in maps like Counter-Strike and how prevalent they are. The answer, not very often. Almost every bomb site has limited angles that you need to check, that you can check one by one, and then enter into a bomb site. In a game like Squad, every time you enter a room or every time you run through a forest, you can't isolate enough angles to be able to do this. I think that works in a game like Squad and makes sense, but in a game like Squad where attacking is already significantly harder than defending, does it seem fair to add these additional mechanics? Let me demonstrate in game here in Counter-Strike really quickly what I mean by 50-50 angles so that you may better understand what I'm talking about. All right, so here I am in Counter-Strike. At the beginning of the round, you spawn up here, and then when you come to attack this bomb site B, we're on Dust 2 here, probably the most recognizable map when I use it. Just want to show you how engagements go on this, or how your first gunfight will go. When you get to this point, right here, the closest an enemy can be is somewhere in this area. So when you come around this corner, they cannot be on this left side if you full knife all the way there. So you are able to get here and see the back of this site prior to them running out here. So if you peek this angle, you can check one angle, right? If they're not at back box, you can now check this close angle. You can check this angle. And as you move up, you can slowly begin to isolate all of the angles where the defender can be, one by one, until you can clear the site. Now, later into the round, yes, somebody can be here, but it's very uncommon for that to exist. And as you're isolating these angles, ideally, you're also going to have extra teammates who can come in and isolate this angle. And again, a game like Counter-Strike, very small map, it's much easier to coordinate team play. So once you get to this point, yes, there are 50-50 angles, but think about all of this map control you've taken. You can come here and kind of clear this back angle, and they can be sitting there, but you're not coming into gunfights where in a game like Squad, every time you enter a building, somebody could be standing either here. Look at this. See this box exist? This exists for a very, very specific reason. Once you clear this backsite, they don't want somebody standing here just waiting for you to come out because your barrel sticks out, so that when you come here and shoot here, somebody could be standing right behind you and you have literally no chance to kill them because you're looking the opposite way. Map design in games like Counter-Strike are very, very deliberate in how they set up their map. And this happens at essentially every angle you need to cross. So just to demonstrate through mid doors here, somebody could be here, but before you go through there, you can clear this angle, this angle, this angle. And once those are clear, you can swing and clear that. This is very, very, very intentional map design done by games, done to balance the attack versus defense dynamic, because it's always easier to defend a point. Similarly, on long A, the enemy, as you're breaching the door, they can really only be this far. It depends slightly on spawns, but for the most part, you don't have to clear behind this door before clearing here. And then even then, you can clear this angle almost entirely out before needing to come backwards, and you don't have these 50-50 engagements. I think this is a really important concept that games deliberately do this. They do it intentionally to enable attackers to have a chance in games. Now, in a game like Counter-Strike, you also have flashbangs, so every time you enter one of these these engagement areas, you can flash the enemy. Defenders have some things like smokes to slow you down, things like that. But my point here being, it is always easier to keep your crosshair on one position than it is to attack a place. Let's say I just ran through these doors and I had to check both angles. You can't check two angles at once. And if you're looking the wrong way, you just die. There's nothing you can do about it if you're looking the wrong way against a even moderately competent player. So that's something that I wanted to show you. Squad doesn't have any of these mechanics. We don't have flashbangs, and even if we did, you'd have to use them too often for them to be effective. So attacking in Squad is already harder. Up until now, we've discussed map design, weapon sway changes, making it more difficult for attacking players. In addition to these factors that are already a big deal, we've also seen a nerf to point shooting. I don't need to show you footage of how much worse point shooting is. Frankly, I think reacting to it will only put me in a negative space. You've seen the videos posted on Reddit. You've experienced point shooting in game. You know how much worse it is than prior to the update. In addition to the point shooting nerfs, the time it takes to ADS has also received a significant nerf. We've also seen nerfs to leaning. Although I tend to agree that the prior state of leaning is a little bit ridiculous and was immersion breaking. The time it takes to lean at a corner now is just really long. And it is something where I don't even see any utility of the mechanic whatsoever unless you're playing purely defensively. That is to say, I don't see any benefit to leaning when attacking sites whatsoever. Something that is less on the nose of nerfs that come to attacking are the movement speed changes. Now, yes, it's obvious that you're not able to go from cover to cover as quickly, which is a which hurts more mobile players. What I'm looking to discuss is the concept of interp or desync, or what is commonly called peeker's advantage. I don't want to go into the details of this, but basically this is a networking limitation of games where basically when you round a corner, you can actually see the enemy very, very slightly before the stagnant defensive player can see you. Generally, we're talking about fractions of a second. Yes, milliseconds. If you're on 20 ping, it shouldn't be more than a couple milliseconds for that to that you can see them before they see you. It's not enough to really make it unfair for defenders, but it's enough to give that attackers just that slight little bit of extra advantage that they need because they're clearing more angles when they enter a site and they don't know exactly where the defender is going to be. It's enough to make it fair. Now, with the reduction of movement speed, the impact of this has significantly nerfed attackers. When you come through a door, you round a corner, defenders will see your barrel or your shoulder coming around the corner for a longer period of time prior to you seeing them. So you have that peeker's advantage is even more decreased due to the movement speed nerfs. I'm not sure this is something that really most players have even considered or OWI themselves have considered, but it nonetheless has a very, very significant impact on your ability to breach doors and attack points. One comment I've heard commonly from supporters of the ICO is that the ICO will improve teamwork. I'm not exactly sure what the thought process is behind that. I haven't seen a good justification from it. And I think those of us who've played prior to the ICO and after the ICO have noticed that doesn't really appear to be the case. I think there are significant underlying problems hindering team play that I will discuss at the end of this video and how I think we can counteract them. Another common argument that I hear is that the ICO will punish lone wolves because they need to play with their team more due to suppression or due to some of these other mechanics. I'm not exactly sure what the thought process is behind this either. I know that personally, I find it actually to be the exact opposite. I find that playing as a lone wolf actually increases my effectiveness in current games of squad. I understand the underlying feeling that now that suppression has been added to the game, that you can use teammates to suppress enemies and that you should do so, and thus, that allows you to attack them. There is a simple fact here, and that fact is that killing an enemy is always going to be better than suppressing them. There's nothing you can do to change that. Respawn timers are long enough in squad, and revive timers are long enough in squad. Healing takes enough time in squad that shooting somebody in the head is always preferential to suppressing them. So while in the prior version of squad, you could the effects of suppression weren't as drastic if you had a teammate suppressing them. What normally happened is if your teammate was also with you, they would just shoot the person and kill them. And I believe there are very, very, very minimal circumstances or limited circumstances where people are going to deliberately just spam corners and suppress people. That allows their teammates to gap close. And the reason for this is spamming bullets from a specific location is very loud, lets the rest of the, anybody near you hear where you're shooting from, and it allows that anybody that is playing as a lone wolf off on a flank or something like that, it lets them just click you in the head, and now you can no longer suppress. So, my common tactic post ICO is that I run off by myself deliberately, and the reason for that being, if nobody's around me, none of the enemy is going to want to suppress my area because they see a teammate. So if I'm running by myself, it's much easier to conceal one player than two on an off angle. And so what I do is I just run to hard flanks, understand where the enemy is coming from, trying to gap close my team's position, and I just shoot them as they're trying to move forward from the side or slightly, from the side and slightly behind them. It takes one bullet. I can still shoot them in the head. And I just sit there in a bush all game and I farm these players who are trying to make progress or who are trying to suppress for their teammates. No matter where you are suppressing from, there is always going to be another angle in squad where you can get killed from. And if that suppression angle is a problem, a enemy is going to try to counter where you're suppressing from. So they're going to try to rotate and shoot you in the head. Now, that's simply good strategy for gaming. I don't think it's something we should reduce. I think it's a limitation that we need to acknowledge in video games, that when you make noise and you let the enemy know where you are, you're waving a big flag above your head saying, hey, I'm right here, shoot me. And no matter what we do to suppression, having this long, extended, suppressive fire tactic that enables friendly players or to move forward and gap close, it's just not something that I think we're going to be able to feasibly make work. And my final point here about why I personally dislike the ICO is that shooting your gun is just not as satisfying in the current squad as it was prior. I understand what they were trying to go for with the changes to the scopes. I believe they do indeed look better. It's more satisfying to look at the scope. However, the feel of actually shooting the gun is significantly worse in a gaming environment. When I aim at something, I expect to be able to see it. Having something obscured from my vision is annoying to look at. Causes some people you've seen the comments on Reddit, this causes some of them to be motion sick. We have this eye relief type scope balance where, if you move your scope too quickly, you see the black edges. I understand that is somewhat realistic. I've shot guns since I was 5 years old. I just think it's significantly overtuned in its current iteration. I personally didn't have a problem with the previous sight picture. I think the addition to blurry scope, the blur on the outside of your scopes is, number one, not realistic, and number two, just annoying to look at. I want to be able to see my screen, not just have it be a complete blur, in addition to the suppression that's blurring my screen for significant periods of the game. And then, the recoil of point shooting is ridiculous, unrealistic, and not fun. The recoil when you're ADS'd and do finally steady your gun feels random, and we've already talked about the negatives of that. Bouncy, it feels like there's not a lot of skill elements you can use other than just basically shooting slower. I think the automatic fire of guns has been significantly nerfed to the point of where, why does it even exist? I think we've tried to balance, 4x scopes versus red dot scopes versus iron sights in a game where it that's just not realistic. I think in most, if you were in real life and you were going to go onto one of these maps and try to, pick a scope on the vast majority of the maps, you'd prefer to have that ACOG. And that's fine. Scopes don't need to be exactly balanced. And they certainly don't need to be tuned to the levels that we have them at now. I don't see any reason that anybody would ever want to use iron sights over a red dot on a rifle, for instance. One thing that I commonly see on Reddit are these Mont and Bailey debate tactics of squad is supposed to be this milsim game. And so we need to have more team play and use bound and cover and all of this. Totally understand that. Understand the people that feel slighted by the release of it. But it's those same people will make that argument that, we need more realistic team play. And then when we come to the mechanics of just shooting a gun, the fundamental mechanic of a first-person shooter, they'll take a step back and say, well, it shouldn't be realistic because it doesn't promote team play. Remember, guys, Squad is a first-person shooter first and foremost. Yes, it is a Milsim one. Yes, it is. We're supposed to be tactical, and it would be nice if we have these, kind of real-world elements and tactics that can be implemented in some way. That being said, I want my shooting to matter in Squad. It does currently matter. It's just that the ceiling for how much your individual skill can impact the game has been significantly reduced to a level that to me is frankly just not acceptable, not fun, and not something that I want to continue playing. Let's not be selective about when we want realism. If we want a super realistic game, I think we should apply that. If we want a game that's fun, I think we should, that has Milsim elements, I think we should move towards that and acknowledge that, yes, this is not realistic and that we're picking and choosing, what we need and what we want. One last thing, to contend with the Squad was previously just a run and gun, and all comp players did was run around and shoot people in the head. Some of that is true. A lot of that has to do with the median skill level of the average player in Squad. And frankly, most of it is due to competitive players or players with a lot of hours in Squad understanding the flow of games, understanding RAS and AAS, understanding where enemies are going to be, their positioning, their map knowledge. Squad has never been a game, even prior to the ICO, where aim is the most important aspect of the game. I've always given the numbers of, Squad is 80% awareness and 20% aim. And that might even be generous. Once you got to a certain level of aim, positioning, utilization of cover, map knowledge, understanding of the flow of games was significantly more important than aim. I'm well into my 30s now. I no longer have super crispy aim. I'll flash up my some of my aim lab stuff maybe here, just so you can see where I fall into the shooters. I'm no longer a great aimer. When I joined a pub game prior to the ICO and racked up 30 kills in a RAS game or 35 kills, it was not due to my aim being significantly better than everybody else's. It was due to my aim being adequate enough and my positioning, map knowledge, understanding of the game, and understanding of the flow of games, understanding where I needed to be at what time. Those are what caused me to get significantly more kills. If I could be an average shooter in Squad and have, 99th percentile game knowledge, or be a 99th percent aimer and have, median game knowledge, prior to the ICO, 10 out of 10 times I'm picking being the average aimer and having the superior game knowledge. The learning curve for game knowledge in Squad is huge, bigger than pretty much any other FPS I've ever played. And I think that by just saying, prior to the ICO, these people were just running around and clicking on heads, I think that's pretty disingenuous. Feel free to refute me. Again, I'm looking forward to a video that maybe counters some of the points I've made here. Now, I've talked a lot about the things in the ICO that I don't like. Is there anything that I like? I do like the lean nerfs. I think that was something that was needed. But after that, I think a lot of the changes were unnecessary. I think visually the new scopes do look kind of nice. It's just altogether the gunplay feels significantly worse in my opinion. What should we have gotten from the ICO? What are things that I and other players like me, and no doubt a significant portion of this community, should have asked for? Well, number one are performance improvements. OWI has stated that they are working on these for a significant amount of time. What we received in the past year was DirectX 12. I think we have all seen the success of that. most players immediately realize it's buggy, does not really increase performance that much, or if it does, it significantly hampers visibility. We need the game to perform better. On a 3080 with a AMD 5800X, my average FPS in game is probably about 100. I experience drops frequently, especially post-update with picture-in-picture scopes down to 70. Most of you will say that that is playable. What I can tell you is, as somebody who's been playing games for a long time, I feel a significant difference between 70 and 150 FPS, and 70 feels worse. And there's no doubt about it in my mind. And I have a pretty darn good machine. You know, it's over a year old now, but I'd still say it's significantly better than the average computer for people playing Squad. And people with mid-level machines should be able to play this game. OWI needs to focus on performance, in my opinion. What else should we have gotten? Well, the primary thing I hear people asking for is better teamwork in Squad. I think there's two things that we can do that would have improved teamwork without making infantry gunplay feel terrible. The first one is very simple, and I understand that there may be some technical difficulties with OWI, and I understand they have limited resources, but a rework of vehicles would have gone a long way towards improving team play versus reworking infantry play. The reason team play is difficult in Squad is because it's hard to stay together after you die. Yes, rally changes are something that we could discuss, but I believe vehicles in their current state feel extremely clunky. They're unfun to drive. If you flip them or make a mistake, it is very punishing. It's very easy to make mistakes by getting caught on tiny twigs that shouldn't stop you, tiny little rocks that shouldn't stop you, things like that. If vehicles were fun to drive, players would be much more willing to, meet up at main and sit in that vehicle ride. I think the speed of vehicles could have used a buff when we're talking specifically about transport vehicles. Hell, even like LAVs, I'd be okay with a buff for, or like MRAP Tiger type vehicles. I think all of those could have used movement speed buffs and quality of life changes. And with that comes people who are going to be willing to use those vehicles more to move their squad as a whole from point to point. Finally, and this is something that I could see it going either way on, an updated scoreboard. I think the scoreboard we have in game does not recognize at all the positive things our teammates are doing for our team. At the end of a game, I tend to be one of the players that has, a ton of revives if I'm a medic, or a ton of kills if I'm a rifleman, yada, yada, yada. What I want to see is vehicle damage done from lats. What I want to see is, or lats and hats. What I want to see is, time transporting squad mates, as time as driver transporting squad mates. What I want to see is time actively engaged with enemies while defending or attacking points. What I want to see is, the amount of hits you've done on enemy radios with a shovel, the amount of hits you've done on friendly habs with a shovel, digging them up, or ammo crates. I want to see things like that. I want to see how many markers have FTLs placed on the map. I want to see, how many markers have squad leads placed on the map. I think, that those FTL things can go for squad leads and FTLs. I think that some sort of perpetual ranking system would go a long way towards incentivizing squad leaders to actually play the role. As it is currently, the role of a squad leader is simply to do bitch work, to build habs that enable your team to have fun. Again, the core of a satisfying FPS game is good shooting mechanics and having fun shooting the enemy. Squad leaders get to do significantly less of that than their squad mates. So let's make it rewarding for them. Let's show something off for them by squad leading that can make them proud of being a good squad leader. I know that this was a lot to get through, everybody. Anybody that did watch and stick around, I appreciate it. Like I said, if you support the ICO, I'd love to see your reasons for doing so, because as of now, I don't fully understand it. Yeah, again, this is Lenny. Hope you all have a great day.